Demi Lovato, the multi-talented singer and actress, once owned a charming property in Sherman Oaks, Los Angeles, California. During her time living in the house, Lovato shared an unusual and intriguing tale that blurred the lines between reality and the supernatural. According to Lovato, she repeatedly encountered the presence of what she described as a cute ghost boy. This apparition didn't instill fear, but instead exuded an innocent and playful energy. The boy appeared regularly, and while he never spoke, his presence was unmistakable. Demi explained in interviews that the ghost didn't exhibit aggression or ill intent. Instead, he seemed to be a benign, otherworldly companion. The experiences reportedly left a lasting impression on Lovato, who has long been open about her spiritual beliefs and interest in the paranormal. She recounted how the encounters were sometimes startling but never menacing, adding to the house's mystique. Eventually, Demi Lovato sold the Sherman Oaks home, moving on to a new chapter in her life. The house, with its modern amenities and unique history, quickly attracted attention from potential buyers. The new owners, a young couple deeply interested in Los Angeles's storied history, purchased the home. Initially unaware of the supernatural tale tied to the property, they later learned of Lovato's experiences through neighbors and online articles. While initially skeptical, the couple has reportedly shared their own eerie experiences since moving in. According to the new owners, they occasionally notice unexplained phenomena, a faint sound of footsteps, flickering lights, and, on rare occasions, the fleeting figure of what seems to be a young boy in old-fashioned clothing. Much like Demi, they claim these occurrences are not threatening. The couple has even taken to affectionately referring to the spirit as Elliot, though they admit they don't know the ghost's true identity. Demi Lovato's former Sherman Oaks residence has become something of a local legend. Paranormal enthusiasts and fans alike are drawn to the house's story, intrigued by the idea of a benevolent ghost lingering in the home. For those who believe, it's a testament to the idea that not all ghost stories are rooted in fear. Some, like this one, are simply an unexpected connection between the living and the beyond. Months after the young couple settled into Demi Lovato's former home, their experiences with Elliot began to take on a more puzzling nature. What started as occasional, innocuous encounters, gentle footsteps in the hall or the soft creak of an upstairs door, grew increasingly specific. One evening, while unpacking a box of old books in their home office, they discovered an unfamiliar item nestled among their belongings. An antique wooden spinning top, aged and worn but polished as if it had been recently handled. Neither of them remembered owning it or seeing it during the move. Curious, they placed it on a shelf, thinking it might be a forgotten artifact left behind by the previous owners. That night, the spinning top inexplicably appeared on their coffee table, spinning slowly before coming to rest as they entered the room. Even more intriguing were the faint whispers that began to echo at odd hours. They weren't distinct enough to form words, but they carried an unmistakable tone, a mixture of curiosity and playfulness, almost like a child attempting to communicate. Compelled to uncover the truth, the couple dove into the home's history. With the help of local archives, they unearthed a startling discovery. Decades ago, the land on which the house was built had once been part of a sprawling orchard owned by a family named Hawthorne. Among the family's 5 children was a boy named Elias, who tragically passed away at the age of 8 in the early 1920s under mysterious circumstances. Strangely, as the couple delved deeper into the story of Elias, the activity in their home escalated. Lights flickered more frequently, and the spinning top would appear in new locations, always spinning, as if guided by unseen hands. Even their skeptical friends, invited over to witness the phenomena, reported feeling a distinct chill when standing near the toy. Then came the night of the thunderstorm. As lightning illuminated the darkened sky, the couple heard something new, soft, childlike humming coming from the living room. Gathering their courage, they followed the sound, finding the spinning top moving on its own, its rhythmic motion perfectly synchronized with the tune. That was when they noticed something else, the faint outline of a figure reflected in the glass of a nearby window. It was unmistakably a child, standing motionless yet radiating a quiet, almost sorrowful energy. The couple reached out to a local historian specializing in Los Angeles folklore, who suggested the ghost may be trying to convey a message. The historian's advice was simple yet profound. Look for what doesn't belong, and you may find what he's trying to say. Over the next few weeks, the couple began scrutinizing every inch of their home, looking for overlooked clues. What they found was chilling. An old crawlspace beneath the staircase, previously concealed by drywall during renovations. Inside was a small box containing faded photographs, a child's journal, and a single, tarnished locket engraved with the name Elias. Unable to resist their curiosity, they carefully opened the journal. Its pages, though yellowed with age, were filled with the careful handwriting of a child. At first, the entries seemed innocent notes about sunny days in the orchard and descriptions of his siblings. But as they turned the pages, the tone shifted. Elias wrote of feeling watched, of shadows moving in the trees at night, and of an unseen friend who whispered secrets only he could hear. The final entry sent shivers down their spines. My friend says it's time to go. He wants to show me where the treasure is hidden. He says it will be our secret forever. And then nothing. That night, the couple woke to a loud knock at their bedroom door. When they opened it, the hallway was empty, but the spinning top sat at their feet, perfectly still. The discovery of Elias's journal and the cryptic final entry haunted the couple. The mention of a treasure and a friend seemed to hint at something much larger than a simple haunting. They shared their findings with the historian, who became equally fascinated by the story. Together, they began piecing together the threads of Elias's short life. The historian revealed a chilling detail. Local legend spoke of strange occurrences in the hawthorn orchard long before the boy's death. Workers reported seeing shadowy figures darting between the trees at dusk and hearing whispers in the wind when no one else was around. Some claimed the land was cursed, though no one could agree on why. What if Elias's friend wasn't an innocent imaginary companion, but something tied to the land itself? Determined to learn more, the couple decided to explore the backyard, where the remnants of the old orchard once stood. Guided by a hunch and perhaps something more, they borrowed metal detecting equipment and began scanning the ground late one evening. After hours of searching, the detector emitted a high-pitched beep near the base of a gnarled old tree. Digging carefully, they unearthed a small, rusted tin box wrapped in layers of brittle cloth. Inside, they found a handful of trinkets. A child's marble, a broken pocket watch, and a key. The key was unlike anything they'd seen before. It was intricately carved with swirling patterns, almost organic in design, and far too ornate to belong to an ordinary lock. Their excitement quickly turned to apprehension when they realized they had no idea what the key opened. That night, as they pored over the journal and examined the key, the house seemed to take on a life of its own. The whispers grew louder, now almost discernible, and the spinning top began moving erratically, as if agitated. Then came the sound, a soft creak, like a door opening. Following the noise, they found themselves in the basement, standing before a section of wall that seemed off. The paint was a slightly different shade, the texture uneven. Without hesitation, they began to chip away at it, revealing a hidden doorway sealed shut. The key fit perfectly. When they turned it, the lock emitted a low, groaning click, and the door creaked open to reveal a narrow passage leading downward. A faint, earthy smell wafted up, and the air seemed unnaturally cold. Clutching flashlights, they descended the stone steps, their breath visible in the chilled air. The walls of the passage were lined with ancient carvings, swirling patterns that matched the designs on the key. At the end of the corridor, they found another door, this one adorned with an ornate carving of a tree whose roots twisted into the shape of a human face. Before they could decide whether to proceed, the humming began again. It was louder now, echoing through the passage, and accompanied by the faint sound of a child's laughter. Then, the voice came, a whisper, clear and unmistakable. You found it. Will you play with me? Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The couple stood frozen, the childlike voice still echoing in the passage. For a moment, the air seemed to shift, thickening, as if the house itself were holding its breath. The carved tree on the door seemed to shimmer under their flashlight beams, its twisted roots writhing like living tendrils. The historian, who had stayed behind upstairs, called out from above, breaking the eerie silence. "Are you all right down there?" Their reassurance faltered as they tried to explain what they'd found. When the historian joined them, he stared at the door in disbelief. "This carving," he said, tracing the outline of the tree, "isn't just decorative. It's protective." "What does it protect?" the woman asked, her voice trembling. The historian hesitated, then said, "It's not what it protects, but what it contains." Despite the historian's warning, curiosity overcame caution. Together, they turned the handle of the second door, which opened with a low groan, revealing a circular chamber bathed in dim, golden light. The walls shimmered with the same swirling patterns, and in the center of the room stood a stone pedestal. On it lay a small, intricately carved wooden box. As they approached, the temperature plummeted. The flashlight beams flickered, and the child's voice returned, now sharper, echoing off the stone walls. "I've been waiting. Don't you want to see?" The box seemed to call to them, its lid slightly ajar. Inside, they glimpsed something faintly glowing, a soft, otherworldly light. But before they could touch it, the walls around them began to shift. What had been smooth stone transformed into faces, hundreds of them, their mouths opening and closing in silent screams. The historian stepped back, his voice shaking. This isn't just a treasure. It's a prison." Before anyone could react, the room seemed to pulse, and the couple was hit with a wave of disorienting images. They saw the orchard as it had been a century ago, lush and vibrant. Children played among the trees, but a small boy, unmistakably Elias, stood apart, his gaze fixed on something unseen. Then came the shadows. They slithered through the trees, converging on Elias as he reached out to an invisible figure. The boy's laughter turned to a scream, and the vision shattered, leaving the couple gasping in the chamber. The child's voice returned, no longer playful but pleading. "Help me. I didn't know." The historian grabbed their arm, pulling them toward the exit. "We have to leave. Now." But as they turned, the chamber seemed to close in on them, the door shrinking into the wall. The voice grew louder, now joined by whispers in a language none of them understood. The woman glanced back at the box, torn between fear and an inexplicable pull to uncover its secret. What if opening it is the only way to free him? The historian shook his head. Or the only way to unleash what trapped him in the first place. The passage back to the surface felt longer, the air growing heavier with each step. When they finally emerged into the basement, they found the house had changed. The lights flickered erratically, the walls seemed to pulse with a faint glow, and the spinning top was now spinning wildly on the dining table, moving without pause. And then they heard its footsteps, slow, deliberate, and growing louder. But when they turned, no one was there. A new voice, deeper and resonant, echoed through the house. He opened the door. "Now I'm free." The air in the house grew thick with tension, as if it were alive, pulsing with a presence that hadn't been there before. The floorboards creaked under invisible footsteps, and the temperature dropped sharply. The shadows, once harmless and fleeting, now seemed to stretch unnaturally across the walls, taking on a life of their own. The spinning top had stopped, but its absence of movement felt just as ominous. The couple and the historian stood frozen in the living room, their hearts pounding in sync with the heavy silence that surrounded them. The voice, deep, ancient, and unsettling, lingered, reverberating through the house as if it were coming from everywhere. "I've waited for so long. Now you'll understand what it means to be free." The historian's eyes widened with recognition. He whispered, more to himself than to the others, "It's him, the one who was bound by the key. The friend Elias spoke of. It's not a spirit. It's something older. Something that should never have been released." The woman, trembling, felt a chill that seemed to crawl under her skin. "What is it? Who is it?" The historian's voice was barely audible, a mixture of awe and fear. An entity, a primal force, bound to the land long before Elias's family settled here. The orchard was a seal, a prison for something ancient, something that fed on the souls of children. Elias, He didn't have an imaginary friend. He was talking to it. They glanced at each other, horror dawning on them. The box they'd found, what if it was more than just a key? What if it was the vessel that kept the entity trapped? They had broken the seal by unlocking the door, unleashing whatever had been imprisoned there for generations. The historian stepped toward the door, panic creeping into his voice. We need to leave now. This place is a conduit. The more time we spend here, the stronger it will become. But as he reached for the handle, the door slammed shut with a deafening crash. The windows rattled violently, and the house groaned as though it were alive, rejecting them. They could feel the walls closing in. The shadows deepened, swirling around them like a storm. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. Silence. But the silence was wrong. It felt suffocating, as though the very air had thickened, pressing against their chests. The woman's breath became shallow, and she felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched, of something circling them, unseen but ever-present. The historian, now visibly shaken, turned to them. His face was pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. It's not just here. It's everywhere. This thing, it's following us. Suddenly, the woman screamed as she looked into the hallway. There, standing at the far end, was a figure, a child, but not Elias. This child's eyes were black, voids that seemed to consume the light around them. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, and their mouth was stretched into a grotesque smile that seemed far too wide for a human face. The figure didn't move, but the air around it seemed to ripple, like a mirage. The historian's breath hitched. That's not Elias. That's something else. It's been feeding on his energy for decades. The woman stepped forward, her instincts pulling her toward the figure despite the overwhelming sense of dread. We need to help it, she whispered, though the words felt wrong in her mouth. But the historian grabbed her arm, pulling her back. No, you don't understand. That's not a lost child. It's a vessel. The entity has taken over the body of every child who's ever lived here. The child's eyes seemed to glimmer with recognition, its mouth twitching upward in a twisted grin. It took a step toward them, then another. The house seemed to breathe with it, the walls shuddering as if in anticipation. As it neared, the temperature dropped even further. They could see their breath now, the icy fog swirling around them. And then came the voice, not from the child's mouth but from somewhere deeper within the house, vibrating through the walls, rattling their bones. I've tasted their fear. I've swallowed their souls. And now you are mine. The floor beneath them began to crack. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to twitch and flicker, reaching toward them like dark, skeletal fingers. The spinning top began to move again, this time racing across the floor, faster and faster, as if caught in the grip of an unseen hand. With a horrific screech, the child's form began to distort. Its body twisted and warped, elongating as if being pulled by invisible strings. The air around them thickened with an overwhelming presence, a suffocating weight that seemed to blot out everything. The child's form became more abstract, a shadow with flickering eyes and jagged limbs, a silhouette of something far older and more malevolent. And then it spoke again, this time not in words, but in an ancient guttural growl that shook the foundation of the house itself. I am free, and I am hungry. The house began to tremble, and the woman felt a searing pain in her chest as if something was clawing its way out from the very walls. The historian looked at them, panic in his eyes. We have to destroy it. We have to sever the connection. But the shadows around them were closing in, and the air seemed to thicken, becoming almost gelatinous, suffocating their movements. The spinning top stopped suddenly, its eerie motion ceasing as the child's eyes locked onto them with unblinking intensity. The historian turned, his face pale. The box is the key to stopping it. We need to destroy the box before it fully awakens. The woman reached for the box, her fingers trembling, knowing that whatever came next would either seal their fate or unleash a terror far beyond anything they could imagine. The woman reached for the box, her fingers trembling as the air around her grew colder, the shadows creeping closer. The historian's voice was barely audible as he shouted, "Break it! Destroy it!" But just as her hand closed around the box, the child, no longer even resembling a child, let out an earth-shattering screech that rattled the entire house. The walls groaned, as if the house itself were in pain, its very foundation shaking. In a desperate move, she slammed the box against the stone pedestal. The moment it hit, a blinding flash of light erupted, blinding them both. The air grew still as the oppressive weight lifted from the room, and the shadows retreated into the corners, vanishing completely. The house fell silent, and the child, now just a shadowy echo, disappeared without a trace. The historian and the woman stood there, gasping for breath, their bodies drained but relieved. They knew the entity had been sealed once more, but at a cost. The house was no longer the same. Its oppressive energy had vanished, but its history remained. With the box shattered and the door locked behind them, they left the house, never to return. The house, now just a relic of the past, stood quiet once again, its secrets buried deep within the walls. The curse was broken, but not without leaving a mark. The house was silent now, but the land, forever changed, would never forget. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.